Can you hear me? Great, that's on. Hi everyone, thank you for sticking around. I am so excited and honored to introduce our first speaker of FEST 2024. Please give it up for Daisy Alioto, founder of Dirt Media.
Thank you so much, happy to be here. I have my emotional support water bottle, which always makes me think of that Kanye West tweet about when somebody leaves their water bottle next to you on a plane and then you have to babysit it. So if anyone wants to babysit this for me, that would be wonderful. My name is Daisy Alioto. I'm the CEO of Dirt Media, which is the last digital media company in America. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the taste economy, which is what we're in right now, and I argue is the rightful successor to the creator economy. The subtitle of my talk is How Not to Roll Over and Die, because if you're coming at taste from a creator or artist perspective, things can feel very tough and demoralizing. So I'm going to talk about taste from the perspective of brands, companies, and capitalism, but I'm also going to talk about it from the perspective of empowering artists and creatives. Did anyone read this book when you were younger? Raise your hand. Wow, okay, so this is a bit of a grail then. This is a rare one. So this book, The Search for Delicious, is basically about a king who wants to write a dictionary that will be used by his entire kingdom and be a single source of truth. But he cannot come up with a definition for delicious. So he sends this 12-year-old boy out into the kingdom to ask everyone what their definition of delicious is, and most people have a different food item. And it almost leads to a civil war because nobody can agree, it's so subjective. So that's a bit of how I feel about taste, and so I'm deliberately choosing not to define taste as part of this presentation, but hopefully you will sort of circle around it and maybe come back on a definition, or you can come away with your own definition for taste. Here are a couple tweets about taste that I really like. I don't know if Michael's here. He's definitely at this. Okay, yeah, let's fucking go. All right, so I mean, I love this tweet because, I mean, this is really getting at where we're suffering for a lack of taste at an institutional level, right? We had, the burgeoning social media platforms, sort of this illusion of democratized taste, but the problem with taste is by nature of taste, it can't truly be democratized and retain its curatorial abilities, but we don't like to gatekeep because that feels mean. So how do we strike a balance? I think that's the tension, one of the tensions at the heart of taste and having a tasteful cultural ecosystem. This other tweet I love because this is just very much about how we employ taste in our regular lives, our social lives, which is to judge our friends and frenemies. And, I don't know Shay, but I think she's talking about chicken tenders here. So no offense to the chicken tendies population, but, don't order that off the adult menu. So Ruby, also at this conference, maybe not in the room, has a wonderful overview of the history of taste in sort of current Western society, going back to the 18th century. And with the rise of industrialization, obviously we see a bourgeoisie class emerge, having access to things that were typically only accessible to the quite wealthy. And through that, people start to use taste as a signal of their refinement, and they start to, for the first time, form these divisions in consumer behavior where we have the virgin, wretched commercial spending, and the Chad, virtuous consumption. And these things really look exactly the same, right? But the difference is, if you're consuming with taste, then you're virtuous. And the lack of taste, you're a wretched virgin. And this isn't only in Europe. We actually see this reflected in the early American project as well. We might be in the late American project, depending on what your point of view is. But as the founders of America are having these arguments about democracy and what makes a good citizen and whether it's innate, we see these parallels between those socio-political conversations and this question of taste and whether taste is innate. So this question of taste and consumption really gets wrapped up in this idea of like, what does it mean to be a good democratic citizen? We don't have a constitution for taste. Maybe we can write one, but it's important to highlight that those conversations weren't really separate and talking about, hello, what this country is gonna be. And part of that was there's this explosion of stuff, right? We're in this industrial period where all of a sudden, there's more chairs, there's more vases, there's more stuff to look at. There's even more oil paintings. This is actually from the 1600s, but if you're a fan of John Berger, which I am, and his series, but also book, Waves of Seeing, we know that the oil painting was really one of the first mediums to really externalize people's taste. And it was sort of that era's version of taking an Instagram flat life photo of like everything that's in your purse or your bag or your everyday carry. So this person was carrying around oysters. But yeah, we can really read this not just as art, but as a portrait of this person's consumption habits, whether virtuous or wretched. And taste, to me, is really wrapped up in this idea of lifestyle. When we talk about social media, we talk about those types of Instagram posts, what we're really doing is externalizing and performing our lifestyle. And that lifestyle really comes down to our relationship with objects. So a lifestyle, as a compendium of the stuff that we own and that we show that we own, is created when we ascribe meaning to objects. It's consumed when we ascribe value to objects. And it's curated when we start to tell a story about those objects. And this is a flywheel that just keeps going, because once we start telling those stories, we start to see our taste in aggregate, and we think of other things that we should own or buy or consume or signal that we like in order to keep this story of our taste consistent. Taste is also influence. So taste is soft power. If you are a country and you are surrounded by superpowers, or you can't necessarily be a superpower, militarily, what do? You export your culture to the world. So South Korea is the best at this. We all know it. K-pop, K-dramas, the dissemination of South Korean culture and entertainment is a form, and a very effective form, of soft power. America was very good at this in the last century. I think we've sort of fell off, flop era. So on my left, your right, this is actually the first issue of Life magazine. And Henry Luce was the founder of Time Inc. And he coined the term the American century in an editorial that he wrote in Life. And Life was meant to be an image-based magazine to export images of American culture to the world, but also bring images of the world back to Americans. And so in this op-ed where he coins the term the American century, this is a sentence I'm highlighting where he's really talking about the soft power of American entertainment last century, but it's nested in an argument for the United States to enter World War II. And so and Henry Luce was a very wealthy individual. He could have gone into politics, he could have gone into religion. And this op-ed is really written as a sort of sermon, but he knew that the American century was going to be defined by exporting culture and not necessarily winning wars, but that those two things might be related. And I really make a distinction between, or I think there's a parallel between this phrase of the American century that Henry Luce came up with as a magazine magnet and this idea of American dynamism, which we now see in venture capital. Venture capitalists are key players in what gets exported to the world, what gets funded in Silicon Valley, and is then used as the rails to disseminate culture, but to create new behaviors around Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. And those venture capitalists, specific ones actually, like Mark Andreessen, have actually moved away from funding media. So their idea of American dynamism is drones, weapons, infrastructure. It no longer includes media. And I would argue that's a huge mistake because the taste economy, yes, thank you. And he also unfollowed me on Twitter, but this has nothing to do with that, really. I don't think that we can talk about the taste economy without talking about media and what media has historically meant. And if you go back to your childhood, everyone has some relationship with a magazine, whether it was Rolling Stone or Vogue, getting it in your mailbox, going up to your bedroom, opening it up, smelling the perfume samples, and feeling like you are having this opportunity to inhabit somebody else's taste. And that was the taste of the editor. But now, for this generation, the experience of somebody else's taste looks a lot more like a vessel, whether it's like a Mr. Beast or an Emma Chamberlain, and they're not really a closed container. One side of their taste is open, and through that open side pours the algorithm, right? And the feedback loop of the algorithm. So we're seeing the most successful creators, the most successful vessels, the Mr. Beasts, who has far more money and resources, I would say at this point, than the average Hearst or Condé Nast publication, achieve amazing success and go on to become essentially his own media company. But he's not like a magazine, because that success comes through gaming the algorithm, or the early success has to, until he attains enough power that he can be a media conglomerate, brand, whatever you want to call it, on his own terms. Which brings me to my functional definition of the taste economy, or my functional thesis, which is that for the last 10 years, taste couldn't be monetized in the algorithm. If you were a media company, if you're a creator, you're playing the algorithm's game. Soon it'll be one of the only things that can be monetized. What does that mean for companies? Well, I argue that it means a large portion of companies, no matter what they're selling, what business they're in, have to function essentially like media companies. Why? Well, post-AI, the cost of creation of a lot of different things is going to go to essentially zero. These things aren't going to be good, but it's going to be cheap to create them. A blog post, a graphic, payroll software. Software is eating the world. Again, shout out Mark Andreessen. Now taste is eating the world. And the moats that we're left with are infrastructure based. So if you have a bunch of NVIDIA chips, nobody can come in and disrupt your company if they don't have what you have. If you have a salt mine, that's your moat. You're making lithium batteries. If you have proprietary technology, if you created Ozempic and there's no generic yet, that's your moat. Those aren't going away. And you can create, the most valuable company in Europe. But most companies now, most startups that are being started now, one that my timeline was like buzzing with this week is Friend, which is the, so it looks like a life alert. It talks to you, an AI wearable that can, ostensibly help with your loneliness and be your friend. That's not hard to make, right? Anyone can come in and disrupt that. But if Friend ends up being the best at disseminating media, telling its story, being a brand, being a media company, then Friend will win. But the next person to come along and make the same thing, if they do a better job with that, that moat will be obliterated. So I have Luar up here. This bag looks like a lot of other bags, right? But brands like Luar and Telfar, they've actually created a community around their product, and they disseminate media. Telfar TV is essentially a 24-hour cable channel for a handbag. So whether you're a seltzer or software or a handbag company, if you don't have more access to raw materials or you don't have proprietary technology, you're now a media brand. Corporate wants you to find the difference between these two pictures, right? This is the same product. Whoever's creating the best storytelling or media or has the more celebrity power, that's who's going to win. There's no other moat for this business, for these businesses. So here's a little bit more of a breakdown of what the taste economy entails and how it's different from the creator economy and the sort of age of the algorithm that we're now exiting. We're going to see smarter unit economics, right? Probably fewer unicorns. You're not going to see $5 Uber rides. We're not going to see $10 sweet green salads. So there's just less subsidy for participation. If you want people to participate, you need to incentivize them to participate and use your product. How do you do that? Through your taste. The hedge against risk that is inherent in developing taste and culture, which really goes back to what Greg was saying, which is you need to have culture in your tech stack. That's not just to be a good person and support artists. It's because you're genuinely going to need it for your business to not be completely replaceable by AI. And the result of building a taste maximized business is high trust, high reward. If I go on Yelp and I read somebody's restaurant review, but I don't know them and I don't trust them, how sticky is my relationship to Yelp? How sticky is my relationship to Goodreads when I go on and somebody says they didn't like a book, but I don't know if I trust their taste? They might be illiterate. So we're going to see more networks. FWB is an amazing example of this, that are optimized for engagement rather than scale and traffic. What does this mean if you're a creator? If you have a lot of money to, disseminate your taste, that's one thing, but not all of us can raise seed rounds for our studio practice. I think the first step is just acknowledging that the zeitgeist has turned in favor of taste, and that should be a good thing for tasteful people. But what we often see in technology cycles that turn is there's a fresh opportunity for creation. It seems like artists could be the winners, but in the end, the capital accrues to the people it's always accrued towards, which are investors, large companies, large brands, and not the people with the most taste. This is a fresh opportunity for the people with the most taste, for the tastemakers to be the winners economically, but we have to behave aggressively and with intention. I don't know if you're familiar with the artist Maya Mann. I'm not sure she's here. We know her, we love her. This is from a project that she did that went out and basically scraped all the live, laugh, love adjacent content and Canvified it into images that were minted on the blockchain. So the accounts won't consume you. Maybe we're free from the algorithm now. But there's a few different aspects of this. If you believe that taste is the backlash to scale, then the opposite of optimizing for scale, the BuzzFeed traffic, is the dress blue or gold era, the llama chase, the putting the rubber bands around the watermelon, then you would believe that we would now optimize for taste rather than the most eyeballs, the most clicks on your ads. Publishers versus platforms was sort of the war of the last 10 years. It's obvious who won. Publishers gave away content and engagement to these platforms in exchange for distribution. That was a huge mistake. Now Elon is, leading Wall Street Journal around by the nose. So what we're going to see is more publishers that are also platforms. If you own the content, if you own the taste, you should also own the community, and that's true whether you're a media company or an individual. And then, this era of ads as cookies. Third-party data and advertising is sort of being sunsetted. Web3 offers a really strong use case for users as cookies in the form of wallets. So now we start to understand people's taste and users' taste through portable data that they control. And having access to that and creating relationships with individuals, whether you're a company or an individual creator, will be a part of that. The winners of the last 10 years, the best media companies to come out of it, and I mean, achieved profitability. I'm thinking we don't have to love them, but they're successful. Barstool, Hello Sunshine, stuff that came out of the Chernin Group. I worked for a company called HODINKEE, which was funded by the same people that funded Barstool. It was a watch magazine that became a watch retailer. It just became only a magazine again, so you can imagine how that went. But for a period of time, the playbook was you do the content first. You could start off as a one-person blog, but if you're really good at it, this is kind of the Barstool example, then you build a community around it, and then you sell them stuff, or you get them addicted to sports gambling, right? This was the playbook. Now the playbook's gonna include a lot more curation. Curation is the layer that sort of nests on top of that, right? Because if you're running the content community and commerce playbook now, you're competing with autonomous AI agents. And the way to beat them is to be a much better taste maker, a much better curator. This is really specific to creative individuals. We all have that one friend that fell into the attention economy trap, right? Your friend who's like an amazing surfer and they start printing t-shirts and selling them out of their truck. Then, the New York Times style section writes about it. They become much more successful and they're miserable. Or your friend that's like, I'm just gonna mint 10,000 NFTs, and now they're in a Discord with a bunch of people with a parasocial relationship to them that yell at them all day because the value of the NFTs is going down. This is the trap. Because it's an attention economy, people have to generate interest for their side project the way that they generate interest for their business. But once you cross a certain clout threshold, there's an expectation of power and an expectation of resources that if you can't meet, you're gonna fall flat on your face, right? So part of being smart about existing in the taste economy is knowing what you wanna be off the bat. And I have a lot of friends that are writers. I have a lot of friends in the literary community who start zines, who start literary magazines, and they're so good at marketing them that within a year, people have gone from championing them and sharing their work to yelling at them on Twitter because they don't pay their writers enough, as if they had the same resources as Paris Review. And it's because it isn't really possible to have the prestige of a publishing company or brand, whatever you want to call it. If you don't work in publishing, you can insert something else here, a streetwear brand like Supreme, without, with just the obligations of a zine. So starting out in the taste economy, we need to know, is this a side project or is this a business? So what do? Do we just roll over and die? Are we all gonna have DIY zines where no money's exchanged? We just give them away for free on a street corner and we watch other people get rich off copying us? No. This is my only service slide in this presentation. This is my only direct advice that I would give about navigating this world of the taste economy. And it relies on some of the slides in history that I have highlighted up until this point. If taste is influence, then we can use our taste to accumulate influence. And we can exchange that influence for the acquisition and retention of a community that can then be monetized. Again, FWB is a really good example of this. It starts off with offline value, especially for art and media. So the things that you create in your studio, the clothes that you sew in your home, and the community arises around people who genuinely like those things and have been exposed to them, maybe on the internet through your Instagram page, but also through meeting you directly, that person-to-person interaction. Then that monetization and more of that retention and community becomes digital. You get friends in Lisbon, you get fans in Tokyo, you're shipping your shirts across the world, you're starting your Shopify page. And that community signals outward. So they start to generate business for you through evangelization. And that in turn creates additional offline value. If you want to be a taste-driven business, but you're starting off as an individual, I think that this is the only way to do it. This is the slide to understand. But I don't know everything. I'm just one lady with a water bottle. So, that's my advice to you, but you don't have to take it. Why should you do this? Well, you're probably already doing it for free for Elon Musk. It is a lot of work. It sounds like a lot of work, right? But if you're sharing your taste online, if you've been posting online for the last 10 years, again, Greg also highlighted this, you've been sharing your taste for free. If taste is our most valuable asset, then giving away for free to people and technologists who are already wealthy is a huge mistake. And part of being empowered within the taste economy is figuring out essentially how to gatekeep yourself. And I love this quote about presence. This is about the fine art world specifically. But if you're an artist and you're showing up to gallery shows and events, you are the most valuable part of the art world. You're showing up for free. And you being there for free is lending credibility to much wealthier individuals, right? Who need you to maintain their wealth, to buy your painting and flip it for $1 million more in 3 years at auction. So this comes out of the art world, but it could really be applied across music, I haven't mentioned music yet, I'm sorry, I love music. Across music, across art, across graphic design, a lot of different genres. So we're back to the search for delicious, the search for taste, what is it? Like I said, I'm not gonna answer that question, spoiler alert. But I have in thinking about how to end this presentation, I have sort of answered it for myself. And the way that I answered it for myself was through this quote by Joseph Brodsky about how to develop taste as a reader. And he says that you can only develop taste as a reader if you read a lot of poetry. And I think, again, if you're not a poet, if you're not in the literary community, there's probably other advice that's parallel. Rick Rubin, not sure where we stand with him these days. He's gonna have different advice, right? But what I really like about Joseph Brodsky is the phrase associative chains, also the phrase proletariat, that the way to develop good taste in literature is to read poetry. And like the proverbial proletariat, you stand to lose nothing. What you may gain are new associative chains. That's a really empowering statement, right? Because if we've been given our taste away for free for the last 10 years to enrich other people, what do we have to lose now by monetizing it and treating it like it's our most valuable asset, because it is. So I'm going to end with some of my associative chains. I run a media company. I also write for the media company, and some chains that I have drawn in the past that for me are poetic and meaningful, to go back to telling stories about objects. You know, last year I went from periwinkles, which are fascinating creatures. My favorite periwinkle fact is that if they're exposed to extreme heat or cold, they'll actually go into their shell and they roll until they land back in the water, which is really helpful metaphor for people with avoidant attachment, but also artists that are just having a really hard time. And that periwinkle fact reminded me and led me to this idea of yearning. I was seeing a lot of memes about yearning at the time, and I started to feel like yearning was sort of like the post-authenticity quality that we're looking for. Because I don't think we believe that AI can yearn, and I think yearning is part of how our taste is developed, wanting something that we can't have immediately, which is a bit of the opposite of the algorithm. And that led me to an artist and technologist named Harold Cohen, who, I'm not sure if it's up, but at the Whitney Museum in New York, there is an amazing Harold Cohen retrospective that was highlighting and demoing his use of this program called Aaron that he created as one of the first AI-generated art programs. And the way that Harold Cohen talked about Aaron was almost like Aaron was his son, or his child, but he was a computer program. And this is work that was done by Aaron and Harold Cohen together. And that associative chain led me to the experience of watching the eclipse with my mom. Because when the sun went behind the moon, I was not watching it. I was watching my mom's face. And it led me to think deeply about what it means to be a parent and what it means to be a child. And that's just one associative chain, but we all have our own. And I think together that forms the fabric of our taste. So I wanted to end on that note. Thank you so much for having me, and come find me if you want to debate any of these ideas, or you know Mark Andreessen and you can tell him that I would like him to refollow me. I'm going to be very well behaved. Thank you.